Okay, thank you, Anne. Hi, everybody. Thank you for signing up for this workshop and the other offerings you had available to you this week. And just a couple little housekeeping things, since some of you may use Teams more than you use Zoom. This is an interactive training, so I would invite you, if you're comfortable, to turn on your videos because I love to see your beautiful faces, and it just helps us all feel more connected. The other thing is there will be a couple times where I will ask you to type something in the chat. So I think if you hover over the lower toolbar, you'll see the chat function. And then if you go right next to that, there's the reaction button. Now, I love the reaction button because when we are all together in a Zoom environment, it just helps us connect better. So if you click on that react button, find something that you like in that button. And that way, if you hear somebody say something that you really like or appreciate, give them a thumbs up, give them some love, send a rocket off, do something, and that just helps us feel a bit more connected with each other. The other thing that you'll find in that reaction button is a raise hand function, because there will be a couple times where I'll ask you to raise your hand. So if you go down, I'd like everybody just to try that. Click on the raise hand. And if you raise your hand and we call on you, please leave your hand up because that will keep your video right in the top of the screen. Because if you take your hand down, suddenly you disappear somewhere else on the screen and I lose you and then I get whiplash. So the other thing that to do is after you raise your hand, lower your hand. So everybody lower your hand. All right, very good. Okay. So I would now like to officially start with inviting everybody to take a deep breath. So we are living in a pretty stressful and distracting world right now. And I found that it is such a gift that we can give ourselves when we bring our full attention to some activity. So for the next 2 hours, I will invite you to push away your cell phone, turn off any other computer programs that you might have running, and then just give yourself the gift of bringing your full self into this training. And for my part, I promise that I'll keep it fast moving and entertaining, and it's going to be over before you know it. All right. So I'm going to start just to get to know you all a little bit better. I'm going to bring up a poll, and it has two questions in it. And so the first one is, have you presented at a conference? Yes, several times. Yes, a few times. No, but I plan to. No, I probably won't. And then number two is, what is your level of comfort giving presentations? Extremely comfortable, somewhat comfortable, not at all comfortable. So take a second and answer those two questions, and then we'll see what your answers look like. All right, give you about 10 more seconds here. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like we have some pros in the room today who have presented several times. Many of you a few times. No, but I plan to. No, I probably won't. Okay. Now, what is your level of comfort in giving presentations? We have a few of you who are very comfortable. You're pros. We have many of you are somewhat comfortable, and some of you are not at all comfortable. All right, so I'm going to bring up a whiteboard because there really are quite a few good reasons why it's not very comfortable to give a presentation. All right, so what I'd like to do now is I'm going to make a list, and I need to make this list on this whiteboard because we're going to look at it again at the end of the training. And what I'd like to do is invite you to raise your virtual hand, and Anne will call on you, and then leave your hand up. And let's make a list of challenges that you've had either giving a presentation at a conference or even observing a presentation at a conference. What are some of the challenges? So go ahead and raise your virtual hand and Anne will call on you. Okay, I see Victoria. So go ahead, Victoria.
I haven't given a presentation yet, but one of the biggest issues that I see is like technology issues and then trying
Mm-hmm.
to like get back onto rhythm after dealing with a technological issue.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Liz, I don't know if you may be muted, Anne.
I am muted. Oh, how silly. Liz, thank you. My gosh, no wonder I'm not getting a response. Sorry.
It when the conference presenter is just reading their slides.
Huh? Thank you, Liz.
Kirsten Davis.
Connected to them.
Good morning. I think simplifying the information so that it's digestible, and sometimes I think presenters, including myself, can get a little too detailed so that you just kind of get lost in the minutia rather than walking away with 2 or 3 or 4 points.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Jamie Halpin.
This is kind of related to what Kirsten said. Just having too much information, so you're going way too fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lori Devereaux.
Yeah, timing on two fronts. One is the conferences we go to where people can't keep to the time, the limited time slot they're given, and the other is when you come after someone who's done that and you now have less time. So adjusting to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Krista Ratliff.
I would say being concise and also presenting like scientific data in a way that the whole audience can understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Vicky Bartels.
When presentations have a lot of jargon, but it's not defined, so it's jargon heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did I miss anyone? Let's see. I have someone doesn't have a microphone set. Knowing how much your audience. Oh, hang on. Let me get into chat. Need a little more of that. Let's see. Knowing how much your audience already knows.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you're either not too basic or too complex.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Acronyms. I see that one too.
Yes, and I was going to say, if you're not comfortable raising your hand and speaking in the group, do put it in the chat now, and I'll share with us.
So boring slides.
I'll put an exclamation point on that one. Okay.
I think we've gotten the questions, raised hands, and that's what's in the chat.
Great. Thank you. Great list.
Oh, I have a couple more. Images and graphs that distract or are not spoken about.
Great.
Busy slides is another one.
Sorry, hang on. Okay.
Busy slides, and the last one is slides that are too text heavy or font is too small. Text heavy or font too small.
Great. Good. This is a great list. Thank you. Let me save this again. All right. Good. So let me just assure you, you are in the right place. And these are some really common challenges that have come up for a lot of people. So we will revisit this at the end just to make sure I'll just quickly click back through it to make sure if there's anything else that needs to be gone into a little bit deeper, we can do that. I'll also have a time for Q&A at the end. But if during the presentation, if I'm presenting on something and you have a question about that exact thing, go ahead and type it in the chat, and then Anne will let me know that there's a question that needs to be answered right then about a certain topic. All right. Now I want to make sure that everybody has two handouts. One is the key point handout that was sent to you, and this is a handout that follows along with my PowerPoint presentation. You'll see the numbers on the slide that correspond to points on this sheet, and it'll give you some room to type notes as well and take notes. And the other one is an exercise called What is Your Key Message? So be sure you have both of these available.
Is there any way to get links to those in the chat? I don't remember receiving them.
And is that something you would be able to put a link to in the chat?
Yeah, let me work that out. Or who was saying they didn't have them? Because I can make sure and send it to you. Who was that? Was that Liz? Okay, good. Let me try. I'll work that out. I'll work on it for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
Okay. So I worked for many, many years in a very sciencey world. And I can't tell you how many hours of my life I lost to mind-numbing PowerPoint presentations, particularly at conferences. So if you've had a similar experience, find the reaction button and give a thumbs up. All right, I'm seeing lots of thumbs ups. Okay. Now, it wasn't that the presenters weren't smart, talented people, because they were, and it's not that their topics weren't interesting, because they were, but it was just the way they put their presentation together just overwhelmed me, or I didn't know what their point was, and I just walk out of that conference session really not remembering anything that I just observed. So it was partly out of self-preservation that I went back and got a master's degree and learned that the reason that, and while I was getting my master's degree, I was mainly studying on how to communicate, how to teach scientists and government officials how to communicate their message, how to present science to non-scientists, and that sort of thing. And I learned a word that really explained why I checked out. And that word, two words really, cognitive load. Now, if you know what cognitive load is, take a second and type it in the chat, and Anne will share with me. What is cognitive load? Does anything come in, Anne? Any question, any answers?
It is, yes. The amount of mental thinking work, full brain, tax on your brain, mental overload, too much to think about at one time, too much information, too difficult a message, and brain processing capacity.
Right. Those are all really close and really right on too. So basically, cognitive load is how hard our brain has to work to learn something new. And I'm here to tell you that we often make people's brains work way too hard. So how do we do that? Well, we might use jargon that people don't understand. One of you brought this up on our challenges list, and that is a really hard thing for people if they don't understand what you're saying. It's like you're speaking a whole different language. Perhaps you're using graphs that they don't know how to read, or maybe the graphs are too small and they just can't see the detail. Maybe there's just too much facts and too much data that you've included in your presentation, and it just throws them into overwhelm. And often your message isn't clear, like they might be sitting there and go, what exactly are they getting at now? And then we often forget to answer the all-important question that everybody's going to ask themselves when they're sitting and listening to you, and that is, why should I care? People need to know why they are listening to you and how your information is relating to them in their life pretty quickly on in your presentation to keep them with you. They need to understand why your topic is relevant to them. Now, I had a former student who said, as an applied environmental scientist, my work is useless if I cannot successfully share my findings with environmental decision makers. And that's from Carly Grayhill, who was or I may still be, an ecotoxicologist at King County. And I will underline environmental decision makers because this can also be anybody you're talking to. It can be fellow scientists, it can be fellow staff, it can be public people who live in your community. But if you can't communicate effectively, it's really a useless endeavor that you're even speaking to them at all. And Carly goes on to say, these best practices that she learned in my trainings have revolutionized the way I give presentations and talk about my work. People find me in hallways at conferences, sometimes days later, to tell me how much they loved my presentation and to share information and ideas. And so that's really what we want to achieve in our conference presentations. And so today I'm here to share that there are 15 best practices for designing and delivering an engaging conference presentation. And we're going to do this by learning some brain rules, some adult learning principles, and how to design engaging visuals. There are 5 modules. Module 1, how to help your information stick in people's brains. Module 2, best practices for slide design. Module 3, best approaches for displaying data. Module 4, slide makeovers. Module 5, using maps and making a case. And while we're going through this today, I invite you to be a participant on 2 different levels. One is as an active participant, because this is very interactive training. The other is as an observer, because I model everything that I teach. So notice what I do to keep your attention. How do I design my slides? What are some things I do to keep you engaged? That sort of thing. So let's go to module number 1, how to help your information stick in people's brains. So the question we really want to ask ourselves is, how do we grab and keep people's attention? Well, I can tell you that we don't do it like this. We don't have a template with lots of bulleted text, big titles, and cheesy clip art, because that will quickly throw our audience into death by PowerPoint. You've probably all heard that term, where we just get overwhelmed and we shut down and we don't take anything in. And what I have found is that often PowerPoint presentations have become more about the presenter and how we present information and our speaking points versus how people take in the information. So really today we're going to be learning about how to make our talks and our slides designed in a way that help people access what we have to say. So I have a poll that I'd like to bring up here. And the poll is, have you ever created a PowerPoint presentation that looks more like an outline of your speaking points? Yes, no, I can neither confirm nor deny. Okay, just a few more seconds here. Okay, so if you said yes, you can see that you are in very good company. A couple of you said no, gold stars to you. And then we have a few kind of suspicious ones that said, I can neither confirm nor deny. All right, so as you can see, this is a very common thing. So back to the question is, how do we grab and keep people's attention? So for the answer to this, I turned to my favorite brain scientist named Dr. John Medina, who wrote this great book called Brain Rules. And Dr. Medina has this really startling statistic, and he says that typically when we go to a presentation, especially one that has lots of bullet points, lots of information on the slide, we only remember 10% in 3 days. 10%. I mean, that is enough to make you want to cry, especially if you've spent a lot of time designing your conference presentation to then realize that people are only going to remember this little tiny bit of it. So the good news is that Dr. Medina and some other people I'm going to talk about today have some really good tips for how to get that number way up. So number one, and this is where you can start using your key point handout, strategy one, start with a compelling introduction. Dr. Medina says your ability to create a compelling introduction may be the most important single factor in the later success of your mission. So what does he mean by that? He basically is saying that if you start off and really grab people's attention, they're going to remember what you have to say later. And the way he explains it is that the first time we hear something new, those events that happen play a disproportionate role in helping a disproportionately bigger role in helping us remember that information later. And so this is how I like to think about it. We have these little portals in our brain where information goes in. But the first time we hear something, that portal is bigger. And if someone really grabs our attention, that portal is even bigger. And that information goes into our long-term memory. So this is brain science that you all as presenters can really capitalize on by grabbing people's attention right up front, and then that'll help ensure that they remember it for longer and much more in like 3 days. So let's see 3 steps. Let's talk about 3 steps to a compelling introduction. And so number 1 is open with impact. Number 2 is to introduce yourself. And number 3 is to state your key message. So we're going to go through each one of these. So open with impact. Now, how do people normally start a presentation? What have you observed when people walk up to the mic or are on a virtual conference or something, but when it's their turn to speak, what do they normally say? And so in the chat, type what you normally would hear someone say when they go up to the mic. And Anne needs to you need
I'm
to
back on you.
unmute yourself. There you go.
Introduction. Hi, I'm so and so. I work for so and so. Their name. Hi, I'm so and so, and this is a presentation on. Hi, I blah blah blah. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Hi, my name is blah blah blah. I'm here to talk with you about blah blah blah. Name, role, presentation, title, topic. Good morning. That's the first time I got that one.
Exactly. Those are great. These are called meaningless pleasantries, according to Roger and Amy Ains, who wrote the book Championing Science. And they basically say, don't do that because you want to grab people's attention. And this is what people are expecting you to say. My name is so glad to be here and all that. And so what you want to do is start off with something that will grab their attention. Now, I want to just say a little qualifier here. This doesn't mean you need to blow people out of their seats or anything, or shock them terribly or whatever. But typically, people, again, will come up with these. So even starting off with a question, a statement, a quick story is so different than what people are expecting. That's going to really help them tune in to what you're talking about. So I have lots of examples. I teach a longer 2-day class where people actually end up designing a presentation and then getting coaching and feedback. And because of that, I have lots of great examples to share in my trainings. So let's look at some examples of how some of my students have opened with impact. That's not snow that my coworker is standing in. That's a pile of road salt. In this watershed alone, up to 18,000 tons of road salt is applied each year. Flooded roads are becoming the norm during coastal events. And here's one of my all-time favorites. Weird, slimy, blood-sucking, 450 million years old. Now, before I go to my next slide, what am I describing here? What was Anna in this slide describing? Go ahead and type in the chat.
Leech.
A lot of people think leech. It's not a leech.
Dinosaur. Fire. Lamprey.
Lamprey, yes, that's it. The Pacific lamprey. Yep, a creepy little creature. But I love that. I mean, wouldn't that grab your attention if someone got up and started that way? All right. Now, number 2 is to introduce yourself. And so you'll notice that that was not step 1. Step 1, open with impact. Then you introduce yourself. And I'm going to show you how this all comes together in just a minute. But there's a way to introduce yourself that helps people quickly understand what you really accomplish in your job. And so it just is one of those things that builds understanding, rapport, trust. And so here's how we often do it. So my name is Carolina with the Nature Conservancy, and I'm a communication specialist. I manage our photo collection, go to national conferences, make sure that scientific research is translated clearly, on and on. That's often how we do that. In fact, give a thumbs up if you've ever tried to tell someone what you do for your work and had their eyes glaze over. Anybody? Okay. I can see lots of thumbs. So here is a template that I would suggest using, and this is the one I teach in my longer classes, and we have a lot more time to work on this, but I just wanted to at least introduce you to this idea. So the template is my name is with who, in this case, the Nature Conservancy, and I help who do what. So here's how hers would be different in using this template. My name is Carolina with the Nature Conservancy, and I help scientists clearly communicate their work. Boom. Much clearer. So again, we don't have time for you to work on this yourself today, but I do have this template in your notes. So I encourage you to take some time before you present next, even sooner than that, because it's amazing how often we actually introduce ourselves to people. I mean, I say to people all the time, I'm Cathy Angell with Cathy Angell Communications, and I help scientists and government officials give presentations that people can easily understand. And so it really makes a difference. Now, here's another thing that I like to add on to your introduction, and that is a photograph. And you wouldn't believe what an impact it makes to your audience, to even though they're seeing you there, to see a picture of yourself while you give your introduction. And it can be, and especially if it's something like you're out in the field or doing something in your work, or maybe it's something that you love to do, a passion, something like that. And so now let me show you a few of these examples that were former students and how they introduce themselves. I'm Stephanie Majeski with the Department of Transportation, and I help interns learn about wetland science and mitigation. My name is Edgar, and I help resource managers at the Kachemak Bay Reserve understand water systems and make better informed decisions. My name is Caleb Shields with the Ohio Division of Wildlife, and I help people achieve wildlife goals on private properties. All right, so we've now learned that we open with impact, and then we introduce ourselves a certain way. And now step 3 is to state your key message. Now, what is a key message? A key message is the gist of your presentation. If someone walked away from your presentation only remembering one thing, this would be it. You want to make your key message very succinct, short and succinct. You're not getting into the details. So let's look at some examples from some of my students that I've had. Well, this is the one I gave actually. There are 15 best practices for designing and delivering an engaging conference presentation. Okay, so that was how I started with mine. Establishing a 9-acre wildflower field will provide a wide range of benefits for the community. The Cowich Canyon Conservancy should prioritize protecting habitats with deep soils associated with them. That soils part was covered up just then. Conducting damage assessments will help you identify and mitigate repetitive flooding. Here's one that from someone I worked with who was giving a virtual conference presentation. If we are serious about salmon recovery, we must seek funding to engage private landowners at the community level. Last one, there are best practices that will help us to successfully implement stormwater facilities and ensure cultural resources protection. So you can see that all of these are short and sweet, and it's the bigger idea that they're getting at. And I put here that you want to spell this out, you want to spell it out and put your key message at the beginning and at the end of your presentation. So you want to have it early on in your right, when you're doing your introduction, you're starting off with a compelling introduction, and then really it should be the last slide people see before maybe your question slide or your thank you slide, because that again will help it anchor in their minds. Okay, so I have two case studies that I'd like to go through with you, two student examples. This first one is by Paula Harris, who's a river and flood manager in Whatcom County. And the other thing I want to mention here, oh, and watch how she opens with impact, introduces herself, and spells out her key message. Now, when I bring her title slide up, you will notice that I do not speak on her title slide. So think of your title slide just as a placeholder. Don't talk over it, because again, you want to start with impact. The November 2021 flooding caused $127 million in damages and impacted over 2,000 homes in Whatcom County. 15 months later, 350 families are still affected, many still not in their homes. This was an international flooding issue which closed the border crossing for several days and impacted several towns. This is a hard problem to fix because the flow split at Everson causes a lot of water to overflow, severely impacting Everson and Nooksack and Sumas and towns north of the border in Canada. But if we stop the overflow, then it will all go downriver, increasing the impacts to Linden, Ferndale, and Lummi Nation. I'm Paula Harris with Whatcom County River and Flood, and I help communities and residents in floodplains reduce future flood damages. Today, I'm here to make the case that there are viable options to reduce flood risk in both corridors, but care is needed to ensure we don't help one community at the expense of others. So you can see those steps. 1, 2, 3. Now let's look at another example. This is Haley Sherman, who's an environmental technician with the Northwest Straits Commission. Watch how she opens with impact, introduces herself, and then spells out her key message. Water is deceivingly heavy. 1 gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds. So what happens to your property when it rains? If 1 acre of land soaks up just 1 inch of rain, the land gains about 234,000 pounds. This can ultimately lead to a landslide. Rainwater becomes stormwater once it lands on the ground and flows downhill. If not properly managed, stormwater runoff can cause erosion, destabilize coastal bluffs, and damage beaches. This poses a threat to private property owners. My name is Haley Sherman with the Northwest Straits Foundation. I help shoreline property owners understand how to protect their property through natural methods. And today, I'm here to show how proper stormwater and drainwater management can protect your shoreline home from accelerated coastal erosion. All right, now I'm going to give you a chance to practice on coming up with a key message. And the key messages might start with something like, just to give you a little bit of your brain, a little inspiration here. It could be, our biggest focus should be, in order to accomplish this, we must. This key finding from our research will help. Additional funding would allow us to. You can best support this group by. The most important action you can take is, in order for this to happen, that needs to happen. If action isn't taken in the next X months, this will happen. So those are just to get your your juice is flowing. And again, this, you don't have to have a presentation that you're about to do. I mean, you could think about what you might be giving your next conference presentation on. You could think about a presentation you've already given, maybe one you want to give. And 3 minutes is not long. I spend probably 2.5 hours on this kind of thing in my longer class. But the important thing is just to give you a little bit of experience applying what I've just taught you, and you'd actually be amazed what you can come up with in 3 minutes. So grab your handout, and I'm going to turn my video off for 3 minutes. And I want to share here too, and just in about a little bit after the hour, we'll be taking a 5-minute break. So you will be getting a break in just a little bit. So I'll see you in 3 minutes, and yeah, just see what you can come up with. So I'm going to stop the share, and we're going to come back as a group, and I would invite people, I'd like a few of you to share with me what you came up with as part of your key message. And this does not have to be perfect, but it's a great time for you to get some feedback from me, and just, this is how we all learn from each other. So Jamie.
I came up with two for the same thing, but I'll just go with the first one.
Okay.
In order for us to continue to meet our inspection goals, the stormwater team needs additional staff.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Just very clear. And yeah, good job.
Max, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, mine's a little longer. I think I like wrote out the longer one first and then was going to coalesce it into starting with your with one of the prompts you gave, but the longer one that I'm gonna
If you
hone
could,
down
before you
is
do that, could you pop it into the chat? That'll make it, if it's long, that's way
sure,
easier for me to give feedback if I can actually be reading it at the same time.
sure. Yeah, I'll have to type it though because I hand wrote it, so I'll let someone else go and I'll just type it in. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Anybody else want to comment? Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
Working on my video here. So I wrote, our outreach and education program has reached thousands of Skagit County residents and visitors in the last year, increasing their knowledge about our county's water quality challenges and how their actions can affect our waterways.
Okay, so that's another one that I would love it if you could, if you're able to copy that and post it, put it in the chat. So I would say you have all the right things in there. It just needs to be slimmed down a little bit. And so so as reached thousands of Skagit County, increasing their knowledge about our county's water quality. So basically you might think about doing something like, when knowledge is something like, oh, I'm just going to be bumpy here for a minute, but something about when the knowledge of Skagit County residents and visitors can be increased about our water quality challenges, their actions can positively affect our waterways, or something like that. Because you can go through, you can get more into the details about how it's reached or in fact, the thousands you could even start off with your impact slide. The outreach and education program has reached thousands of Skagit County residents and visitors in the last year, increasing their knowledge about our county's water quality challenges and how their actions can affect our waterways. Then you could introduce yourself. And today I'm here to share with you. And then, is there an ask that you're ultimately going for, kind of is there something more specific that you're wanting to get at? Like, are you asking for something?
In this case, no, it's a presentation to our board to just inform them of our new outreach, well, sort of new outreach and education program and the good work we're doing.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, so another way you could start is basically what some of the water quality challenges have been in Skagit County. Then you can share how. So I'm Karen, and today I'm here to share how, by educating residents and visitors in Skagit County about our county's water quality challenges. Let's see. maybe leave off even water quality challenges, but how their actions can positively affect our waterways.
Nice.
Something like that. You know, see what
Yeah.
I'm getting at? So you grab their
Yeah.
attention with the problem, and this has been what our county's been dealing with. This is who I am, and today I'm here to share how that or share that by increasing the knowledge about water quality challenges or I'm still not getting at it. I feel like it's like something more like by teaching people how their positive actions can affect the waterways will anyway, something like that. You know what you can see where I'm trying to go with this,
Yeah, I
right?
get where you're going.
Okay, thank you. Not been quite as smooth as I'd like to be here, but I know you know what I mean. Okay, all right. Okay, now back to Max. So let's see. In many situations, pollution is caused by a few major actors, such as corporations. With stormwater, however, it is our everyday actions that most impact our waterways. This provides a unique opportunity to have an actual impact on improving the health of our local watershed through engagement and behavioral change work. So it could be something like, again, that all could be in other parts of your presentation, but really the main crux, it sounds like what you're wanting to get at is by improving our through engagement and behavior change work of our local citizens, our let's see, like by so through engagement and behavior change with our local citizens, um, that it can have it can improve the health of our local, how about the health of our local watershed can be improved through the engagement and behavior change work with local corporations or citizens, or are you wanting corporations to be the main person you're concentrating on here?
No, sorry. I guess what I was trying to emphasize, and I was trying to use like non-jargon, right? But like the difference, I guess, with stormwater pollution is that the most major pollutant source is non-point source, right? Like it's diffuse. The impacts are across the city with different individuals. So yeah, everyday actions have the most impact on our stormwater system is a great way of putting it, because it's
Yeah.
like not corporations, it's individuals. And so people can have real impact with it.
Right, exactly. Perfect. So you could just basically, start off with that, non-point source pollution is the biggest source of pollution in our area, blah, blah, blah. I'm Max, and today I'm here to, and you give your introduction. Today I'm here to share how everyday actions can have the most impact on our stormwater system. Something like that.
Right.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes. Let's give Max and I forgot to give a thumbs up to Karen too, but let's give a thumbs up to everybody who's just presented. Great. I'm going to see Adrian put one, these everyday actions cause significant pollution, but these, yeah, for your key message, you want it to be kind of a standalone thing where you can put it and people could repeat it later, or so you don't want to tie it too closely with something else. So have it kind of a standalone sentence, and then you end with that too. So, all right, good.
Oh, Jamie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, and we might get to this at the end, but with repeating that key message at the end, do you tend to repeat it verbatim, kind of the same line, or okay, just to emphasize that is the point? Okay,
Absolutely. And you
okay,
could just copy that first slide and put it at the end.
okay. Thank you.
Exactly. You're welcome. All right. So strategy 2, provide the big picture before getting into the details. And Dr. Medina says that when we provide the big picture before getting into the details, it increases people's understanding by 40%. 40% just by painting that bigger picture. Now, the way I painted the bigger picture at the beginning of my training was to talk about basically how we throw people into cognitive overload. So I'd like you to put your thinking caps on for a minute and pretend that you're going to be giving a talk on why our community needs more funding for rain garden installation. Think about what is the bigger picture that could help paint this bigger context for people before you get into the specifics about rain garden installation. What's that bigger need in the first place, this higher level need? So think about that for a minute. And when you have an answer for this or an idea for it, go ahead and type it in the chat and we'll share your answers with me. Oh, you're muted, Anne.
Yeah. Are we raising hands? Are we typing? No, we're typing, huh? Okay.
Does anybody come up?
Let's see. To provide more resources, rain gardens prevent flooding by capturing stormwater, absorption capacity. Let's see. Anyone else?
You get even a little bit bigger than that. Like, what's the bigger need? I'll give you a hint. Rain, snow melt.
Rain gardens prevent flooding by capturing stormwater. To protect our drinking water, the aquifer, reduce flooding and save water. When we all do a little, we do a lot. The risk of flooding is real to everyone. Filtering pollutants to help with stormwater management. Rainwater that soaks into the ground enhances groundwater supplies and prevents pollutants from entering our waterways.
Right. Those are good, really good. And so basically you're wanting to kind of paint this bigger picture that people can relate to. So for instance, how rain and snow melt can pick up pollutants like oil and fertilizers and plastics and chemicals, carry them downstream into untreated local waterways where they harm fish, wildlife, human health, ecosystems. So you could kind of paint that bigger picture of the big global, the big picture before then narrowing it down. And that just helps people understand. So people might understand, say, that a rain garden might help with flooding, but then what are some of the bigger reasons that some of you actually mentioned, which is they can spread pollution. If flooding can spread pollution into our waterways and chemicals and that sort of thing. All right, very good. Thank you. The other thing you want to be sure and do is use real world examples that are familiar to the learner. Can they relate? And here's a little here's an adult learning principle for you. It's very hard for people to learn something new if they don't have anything to connect it to. It's very hard for people to learn something new if they don't have anything to connect it to. And so one thing we can do as presenters is to help connect people to our topic through something that they can relate to. And adult learning scholars call this making meaning. So you can help the audience make meaning of your topic by helping them understand something that relates to their personal life. Like maybe it was a flood everybody experienced in your community or something like that. Okay, another thing that John Medina says you want to do to help people remember what you say is to trigger emotions. And when we trigger emotions, it drives that information deeper into people's long-term memories. And he has two ways that he likes to trigger emotions, and or the most effective way to trigger emotions. And the first one is through stories. And these can be short, they can be long, they can be little anecdotes, but it's stories that help people get into their hearts. And as you probably all have experienced, facts don't change behavior. Facts don't change behavior. If just laying a lot of facts on, you've got to combine them with something that reaches people's hearts that they can relate to. So let's pretend that you're going to give a talk to a group of business owners. And these business owners happen to own dry cleaning businesses. And you're wanting to talk to them to try to convince them to let go of their dry cleaning equipment and adopt wet cleaning equipment, which is much safer for humans, for our wildlife, for our waterways, and that kind of thing. So you might start with a story to help open people's hearts. So Mr. Kang and Mrs. Park have run a dry cleaning business for over 35 years in Seattle. But for many of those 35 years, Mrs. Park would go home with headaches. She was tired. Her brain felt fuzzy. She just really didn't feel well. Well, 3 years ago, they switched to a professional wet cleaning system, and now Mrs. Park goes home at night and feels way better. So you might tell a story like that might open people's hearts up before getting into all the specifics of the toxins of dry cleaning chemicals and how impactful they are in a bad way. Here's a student who started off his introduction with a little story, and he says, "I love fish, I'm a great listener, and therefore I decided to become a bioacoustician." Now, you can also tell little stories about if you go out in the field with a group of people. You might tell stories of your research or what you encountered. And people love this stuff because they can't really visualize. They don't know what you do out in the field or in your job. So if there's something interesting that you could bring back in a way of a little story or anecdote, that is really engaging to people. Now, the number two way to trigger emotions is through large photographs. And I mean photographs that are stretched border to border on your slide, or if you have a vertical top to bottom, but you want to fill the slide. Your images do not need a border around them, a frame. They don't need a drop shadow. Make them completely fill your screen. So let's look at some other examples here. Now, sometimes it's tempting to put multiple images on a slide and lots of text, but I invite you to see how you feel differently in your body looking at this slide and looking at this slide. Are bulkheads the answer to sea level rise? Okay, how about this one? Here's another example. How do you feel differently in your body looking at this slide and looking at this one? So how do you feel differently? Go ahead and take a second and type in the chat.
Feels closer and more immediate, less eye strain. Feel more like you're at the site. Better focus, front and center, more impact, less mental overload.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because when you're looking at this slide, you're looking at 3 images sitting on a slide. But when you look at this one, you're in the photo, you're immersed. And Dr. Medina says using large photos like this, well, he says photos, I'll amend that to say large photos, is a superior way to help people remember what it is you're talking about. And so you'll remember that statistic he had about we mainly only remember 10% in 3 days. Well, he says that if you use a photograph with what you're talking about, and it's a clear, sharp photograph, it goes along with your subject matter very well, that will increase that percentage up to 65%. I'm going to underline that, 65%. That is one of the easiest things we can do as presenters to help people remember what it is we have to say. I'm not saying you have to use a photograph on every single slide, but when you use a photograph, make it big. Help your audience immerse in that photo. Now, Dr. Medina says in his brain rule number 10, vision trumps all other senses. We are visual learners by far. More of us are visual learners than not visual learners. And people can sort of feel the message before they can read the text when they see a photograph. So very, very, very powerful. So I always tell people, if you're in a job that is fairly visual, or if you're going out in the field, take lots of pictures, or go to your people who are like your outreach staff. They might have photos for you, or other staff, um, your colleagues. A lot of agencies have like Flickr accounts and that kind of thing. So use lots of photos. All right, module 2, best practices for slide design. And then we will go into a short break as soon as we get through this module. So one of my favorite gurus is Gar Reynolds, who has 2 books. One is called Presentation Zen, and the other one is Presentation Zen Design. And it's really about how to use the principles of simplicity when you're designing your slides. And he says that we have a tendency to put every important thing in our presentations. And I know a couple of you in the challenges list mentioned, how do you know how much to put in? How much do you leave out? Well, and so why do we tend to put every important thing in our presentations? Well, Gar Reynolds says it's because we are often experts in something and we don't want our audience to miss out on anything that we think is important. But what we end up doing is just a big data dump on people's heads, and then they check out. So he says you want to avoid something called a slideument. A slideument is when you have a whole lot of text on a slide. So it's not really a document and it's not really a slide. So that's why he calls it a slideument. So let's look at a few examples of slideumints. There's one. Yeah. So here's the truth about text. People have a very hard time listening to what the speaker is saying and also reading a lot of text at the same time on a slide. And if the presenter is paraphrasing what's on the slide, it even makes it harder for people to take it in. That really throws them into cognitive overload. And so John Medina says that our brains are sequential processors. So even though we might be able to flip back and forth really fast, we can really only give our attention to one thing or another, even again, if we're back and forth quickly. Now, a little test that I've given myself, or I've noticed, and maybe you've had the same experience. Have you ever been at a stoplight and you hear your phone buzz and you think, oh, let me just quickly check my phone, see if a text came in or something. And you look at it and then you look away. Well, the light has changed and the cars ahead of you have already moved on. And you thought you were that fast. So I won't ask you to do a thumbs up on this one. But I'm telling you, oh, Jamie's admitting it. Yes. So I think that's probably happened to all of us. And so that just is a great demonstration of how we cannot focus on one thing more than one thing at a time. And so luckily, Gar Reynolds has some great examples of great suggestions of how we can deal with this issue. So he recommends in strategy number 5 here, use one concept per slide, just one concept. So let's look at some examples of one concept. Between 2018 and 2020, your neighborhood flooded 10 times. Non-native eelgrass is increasing faster than native eelgrass. Maybe you just are going to talk about clogging. Or here's a graph that someone might talk about tides. One concept. In 2018, the Swinomish tribe welcomed over 100 family canoes in the tribal canoe journey. Now you might be thinking, is what she's suggesting that I should put a lot more slides in my presentation? Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. My theory is to have a lot more slides and to go quickly through them. And what's so great about this is that, first of all, even if you have a complicated technical topic, it breaks it down into bite-sized pieces for your audience. And again, the whole purpose of our presentations should be to help our audience understand something, right? And so by breaking your information up into smaller bites and one concept per slide, it's so much more accessible to them. And It's way more fun for you as the presenter to give a presentation like this because you don't have to remember so much on one slide. You just have lots more triggers to help remember what to say, so you don't have to like read a script so carefully to make sure you say everything. You've got lot more prompts. I mean, put a little bit of text on a slide. And so all those things are really so helpful when you're giving a presentation. Now, you might be asking this, but they're going to post it. Where do I put the text? So I call this the conference presenter's dilemma, because what happens is that people find out that their PowerPoint is going to be posted with all the conference presentations. And so then that's why people often then create sliduments, because they think, oh, if someone went back later to read this, they need to know what I was saying on this slide. But that is the opposite of what you want to do. So what I suggest is having when you save your PowerPoint, save it as a PDF with notes and put your notes and details down in the notes section. And that way it's all there. People can see it all. And the other thing that I would recommend is if you make a key point handout that you make available to people, you could also have your conference presenters post that as well. That is certainly what I've started doing. And that really starts helping get people away from feeling like they need to put all this text on their slides. Strategy number 6 is this really has to do with what Gar Reynolds says is sort of the trifecta of perfection here when you have a presentation. So first of all, you have your PowerPoint slides, and then you have any notes that you might need to glance down at just to prompt your memory about something, and then have a key point handout, which is what you all got when with this training. And again, a key point handout is a living document that you can follow along with the main points and take notes. And Gar Reynolds says key point handouts will set you free. Why will they set you free? Well, because as you're designing your presentation, you can design your slides to be slides that your audience can easily take in and understand, while resting assured that your most important points are written down on a handout that everybody has with them. So I highly recommend the use of a key point handout. Okay, now strategy number 7 is to be one with your slide. And this gets right back to that issue of text on your slide. Now, I'm first going to show you a slide that is usually how we give a presentation. There are lots of things that you as homeowners need to remember to do in case there's a wildfire in your area. And it's things like, buying flood insurance and making sure that your home is strong against any kind of damage. You might want to make sure you have evacuation routes planned. Okay, did you see how you disconnected from the slide with all that text and I'm just sort of paraphrasing? Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to do this the right way. Okay. Wildfires leave the ground charred, barren, and unable to absorb water, creating conditions for flash flooding and mud flow. As homeowners, you should remember to, number 1, buy flood insurance. Number 2, strengthen your home against damage. And number 3, plan evacuation routes. And today, and 4, conduct a home inventory and document your possessions. And today we're going to learn about how to buy flood insurance. So you can see what I did what I did here. I brought the points in one at a time and I read exactly right along with you. I bolded some of the key words and then I made them a different color. And here's a little tip for those of you whose agency has branding guidelines and branding colors. Pick a couple of those colors and use as highlight colors during your presentation. It's subtle. It's just a really great subtle way to help brand your agency. Okay, the other thing is I wanted to point out is that you will never see a bullet point in any of my presentations, just because I have such a visceral reaction to them at this point. And also, you don't always really need them, especially if you bring things in one at a time. However, with that said, sometimes it's really good to number a list like this because within, if I'm talking to homeowners, I'm going to go through 4 things that they can remember to do. And if those 4 things are numbered, it's going to be a lot easier for them to remember. Oh, there were 4 things. Strategy 8 is to use contrast. And we use contrast in our presentations to help people actually really see what's on the slide. And Gar Reynolds suggests a white background with black text or really dark text, and that's my preference as well. But I have one caveat to this. And several years ago, I was giving a similar presentation to a big state agency here in Washington. And there was a woman sitting in the front row who was wearing dark glasses. And when I got to this slide, she raised her hand and she said, "My eyes are really sensitive. And even with my dark glasses, that white background is hurting my eyes." So we had a little talk about that. And she gave me a great idea that I've been using ever since. And that is to dim the background down by 10%. And this is how you do that. So when you're in PowerPoint, you go to your design tab and then you go over to where it says format background. And then you go down to color, and that should be white. And then right below it, where it says transparency, make that 10%. And then you can click a box and it will apply it to all your slides. And that will dim all your slides down. And I have been doing that ever since. So I'm always learning from my students. Now, strategy 9 is never this. So why never this? So type in the chat, why never this?
Color blindness.
Right. If somebody was colorblind, they could not read this or have a very hard time reading this. And so some people say, well, should I never use red or green in my slides? They're great colors. I use them all the time, but use them for things like accent marks or accents or arrows and that sort of thing. But you just don't want one on top of the other. And that also includes, be very careful if you have a large photograph that has a lot of green in it. Be sure and don't put red over a photograph of like a forest or something like that. Strategy 10 is to be prudent with your font size because, and I have this in here because when we learned how to use PowerPoint, we were really taught that we need to use really large fonts, and it's not necessary, and it's often really hard for people to learn to read what we have. So I've done a lot of polls over time with every kind of screen size and size of the room, and without question, the one that has always come up the most is font size 28 as being the most comfortable font for people to read. And so it's just a place to start. So sometimes I go smaller, sometimes I go bigger, but that's just something to keep in mind. And you want to focus on sans serif fonts like Arial or Helvetica or Calibri that don't have all the little curly cues like Times New Roman or Garamond would have. These are much easier to read on screen. Now, strategy number 11 is to release the template. And this is a little bit of a delicate one because you may work for an agency or organization that requires you to use a template. But I do have a few opinions about this. First of all, templates can take up a lot of real estate on your slide, and they can also just be flat out distracting. And so it's really not necessary to have a template on every single slide. And in fact, here's some brain science for you, and that is our brains are hardwired to notice difference. So if they are looking at the same format, slide after slide after slide after slide, that causes people to get bored and check out. And so that's one big brain science reason not to have one. The other reason is it's understandable that your agency wants to brand have their branding, which is absolutely great, but maybe just use it on the title slide or the end slide. To put the logo on every single slide is like me introducing myself at the beginning of every sentence. It's just not necessary, and it takes up space. Now, sometimes people say, well, what if I'm giving a presentation at a conference and my presentation is going to be posted online or maybe someone's in the audience and they just take a picture and they don't know where it came from. And that is fair. That is very fair. So what I would suggest in that scenario is to, in tiny letters and tiny font, put the name of your organization like across the bottom of your slide or up the side, but in a way that is not real noticeable, but it's there if somebody needs to reference it. Now here's a bonus strategy before we go to break, and that is to save your PowerPoint as a PowerPoint show so that it opens in slideshow view. And that is where you do all your editing in the native file, and then when you're ready to save it, save as, and you'll see a long list of things you can save it as, and sure enough, about halfway down, you'll see PowerPoint show. And then you save it there. And what's so great about that, and especially when you're presenting in a conference, it brings your presentation up on the first slide. And that is, we've talked about how you want to open with impact. And so when, usually when people bring up their PowerPoint, we can all see the slides that are coming up over on the left, and then they're poking around trying to find the start button. It just kills the impact all the way. And so I recommend doing this. It's just so sharp. It's a sharp way to start. Now, let me say one thing about this, though, is that if you have it in PowerPoint show, you will not be able to read your speaker notes. But with that said, if you design your presentation the way I'm teaching you, you really will not need to be so tied to your speaker notes. If you have a few slides that you're a little bumpy on, just have a sheet in front of you on the lectern or wherever that you could glance down at. But it's really so much more effective if you can just give your presentation, just speaking to it, the information, and again, use this format to really help prompt you along. Okay, so is there a question?
Any advice on how to convince leadership to release the template?
Well, you can tell them you took my class. First of all, you can blame me on if you want to. And there's actually, you can show them your handouts. You can, and it's really proof. This is probably the most important thing. Design a presentation without it. Use their branding and template on the first slide and the last. Use a few of the colors in some of your key, your highlighting words, and then let them see for themselves how much more convincing and immersive it is. So it's really do it by just demonstration. That's a really huge way to do it. And I'll tell you, before we go to break, I'll leave you with one little quick story that will give you hope. So again, several years ago, I was talking to a group of the communications director and all the communication specialists who worked all around the state. And they were all in the room together. And when I got to that slide about releasing the template, the communication director sat back in her chair and went, "Oh, thank God." And that agency quietly let that template go away. They may still have some templates that people can use if they want to, but they don't enforce it anymore. So there is hope. And again, I think you could send them to one of my trainings, or you could just, again, start modeling it yourself. All right, everybody. Thank you for your attention to this point. I will see you in 5 minutes. I'll just turn off my screen and turn it back on in 5 minutes. Hi, everybody. Welcome back from break. Please turn on your camera so I know you're back with me, and we'll move on to our next module. All right. So we've learned how to grab and hold your audience's attention, best practices for slide design. Now we're going to learn a few tips on best approaches for displaying data. Gar says the only rule concerning the display of data, besides telling the truth, is simplicity. So in strategy number 12, it's to use the appropriate type of graph or not, because sometimes simple text can be effective for showcasing one number. So let's look at an example of that. Chinook salmon are at 4% of historic levels. So sometimes, depending on your audience, you don't need to give them all the methods you use to get to a certain number. They just need the number, and it'll be up to you to determine if the audience you're speaking to needs to know your methods and all the steps that led up to that, or are they fine with just the number? You know, if you're presenting at a conference with other scientists who are in your field, they will want to know how you got to that number. But if you're speaking to a real diverse group of people, maybe they don't need to know as much detail. Now, bar graphs compare categorical data. So for instance, planners were the largest group in the last class. And then you can see how those bar graphs represent the different categories. Now, vertical bar charts show how categories change over time. So non-native eelgrass is increasing faster than native eelgrass. The other thing I want to point out on this slide is that anytime you have a graph, be sure and put the point of the graph in sentence form across the top of the page. And that will really help your audience get right to the point of what you're talking to when you're talking about your graph. Now, line graphs show trends over time. And here was a graph from a student who talked about how the herring population has dramatically decreased since the second refinery was built at Cherry Point. And you can see how well a trend line works when you're wanting to see a change over time. And then she used some animation to show what was happening at some of the different points in time. Now, I don't recommend using a pie chart unless you just have 2 or 3 things that you're comparing. And if you do use a pie chart, be sure and put those labels right over each piece of pie, because pie charts are really difficult for people to read. And using a different type of chart is much more effective. It's hard to read the labels. You're asking people to compare really odd shaped slices. So again, try to stay away from pie charts. And there's a great book by Cole Nussbaumer-Knaflic called Storytelling with Data. And Cole says you really ought to stay away from any chart or graph that is named after a food, like pie chart, donut graph, spaghetti graph, that sort of thing. Now, this book is great. And if you do end up presenting data very much, I highly recommend this book. It's beautifully designed, and it doesn't really matter what your field is. You can learn so much from this book. And Cole has a word that was new to me, and maybe it's new to you, and it's pre-attentive attributes. Pre-attentive attributes. And what that means is that we can control where people's eyes move on our slide. And we can do that with size and shape and color and animation. And so let's look at some examples of how to do that. So on this, back to this slide, you'll see that I made the planner bar blue so that your eye immediately went down to that blue bar. And the scientist for this graph, same thing, did this red line with 103% increase. And so your eye goes right there, you know, immediately what is trying to be communicated here. You can use animation like with arrows and text, boxes, anything that just helps draw the eye. Okay, so now this is all going to bring us up to slide makeovers, and this is where you really get to think about what you just learned in these last couple modules. So sometimes when I'm doing hired by an agency, they'll send me some problematic slides and ask me to redo them and then use them as kind of before and afters in the training. And so here's some examples. Here's one example that came through. And so what if you just think about what you just learned, and then type in the chat, what are some of the challenges with this particular slide? And then Ann will read them as they're coming in.
Oh, I lost you for a minute. I lost you for just a minute. Weird. Okay, too much to process. Hard to see what you're looking at.
What else? Think back to all those best strategies that you just learned.
Don't know what the point is.
Hmm?
Serifed font? NOA watermark is
Mm.
distracting. Doesn't give you the point of the graphs. They're too small. The graphs are.
Yep. Yep. Great. And I want to compliment whoever said the part about the font being the serif font. That you may be the first person who's ever said that in a training. Very good. Way to notice on that. Okay, so this is how I redid it. And this isn't the only way, it's just how I was able to redo this slide. So I was able to put a point at the top. A century of climate data shows us that the trend is toward more frequent and severe flood events. Then I took one graph, I made it bigger, and then I said, this is where Hurricane Sandy hit, right here. Now, sometimes people will say, well, is there a reason you did a line break like that on your point? And there is, because when I had it go across the whole top, there was a weird line break. It just like two words were down on the next line. So I just thought visually it looked better to break up the point that way into two lines. Okay, here's another one. So what's wrong with this slide?
It says text heavy.
Mhm,
Hard to tell what's most important.
mhm,
What are they trying to say? So many numbers, lots of data.
mhm.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Overwhelming with numbers.
Mhm.
Not interesting.
That pretty much says it, right? It's boring. All right. So this is how I redid this slide. The U.S. Geological Survey has a strong and important presence in West Virginia, and because of the unique topography, the rivers and streams rise and fall at a very rapid rate. So approximately 200 stream gauges measure the water level and flow in streams. So why do we have these stream gauges and what can they tell us? Well, they can tell us, should we issue a flood or drought warning? Are the conditions safe for boaters and other recreational users? And will the water supply be sufficient for reservoirs, drinking water, and wastewater facilities? So that's how I redid that slide. Now I want you to think about that slide for just a minute and imagine that slide was given to Congress. And we wonder why there's confusion. All right, so module 5 is using maps and making a case. Now, if you use maps ever in your presentations, go to the reaction button and give a thumbs up. Okay, I can see thumbs up on my screen that I can see, but I imagine there's more out there as well. So maps are people actually really like maps. When I was coordinating the coastal training program here in Washington, we did a comprehensive needs assessment survey at one point and asked people, what are some of your favorite educational tools? And number one was photos, and number two was maps. So people really like maps, but there's a few tricks that you can use to help people know where they are. Because sometimes if people just see a map, they don't really know the context and where it fits in. So my suggestion is to start at a higher level and then go down to more of the local level. So here's a student who was going to be telling a group about a culvert project that was happening. And so first showed the state of Washington and put a circle around the area where the project was going to be. And you always want to make sure you have points of reference too. So you can see that the interstate numbers are points of reference here. Then he went into a more detailed map. It will come closer in. You can see more detail where it is. And then he actually had an aerial shot with showing exactly where the culvert was going to be, the project. And then the point of reference is Yarrow Point neighborhood over in that left-hand corner. there was a presenter that was presenting on a virtual conference I was watching once, and I really liked his slides, so I just did a screenshot of it. But it's Dr. Bob Johnston actually had an aerial view of the Olympic Peninsula with an "I am here." I just really like that. So people, because this was a conference that was given to people from all over the place, so that helped them see where he was located. And then he actually got down even closer with a aerial view from a plane. I just thought that was clever. All right, strategy 15 is to use before and after slides to show contrast. This is a very powerful way to either move your audience forward or to just show what it was before and whatever you did made it better and different. So let's look at a few examples. So here's a before shot of hard armoring in front of these shoreline homes. And this presentation happened to be given to a group of real estate agents who were going to, hopefully, we hoped, would try to explain to shoreline homeowners who bought these homes that really taking out the hard armoring would be so much better for the environment and for their property and everything. And so people were kind of listening, they were sort of listening half-heartedly through people talking about regulations and how the critters in the water would feel better and thrive better. And then Dan Nickel with the Watershed Company got up in the afternoon and he showed this photo. And then he showed the after photo. And I'm telling you, that group of people sat up in their chairs and they were with us more than they'd been the whole day because they could see it, they could feel it, they could see the difference of before and after. It was a very powerful thing to witness. Now let's say that you were going to be talking to a community group of residents who live in this area, and it's about replacing this fish barrier culvert. And they know, and you know, that they are going to be greatly inconvenienced for maybe like 7 or 8 months. So you might acknowledge that inconvenience and then say to them, but this is what is going to be happening that I think will make it worth it for you, because in 7 months, you're going to have this really nice bridge. There's going to be walking trails and biking trails that make it safer for your family and your children. There's more room underneath and wildlife can go under it. And so that's something that you can use in your conference presentations or any presentation really, where you kind of want to make a point about what is possible. Now here's a bonus module with just a few tips for presenting in a virtual conference. So one thing, if you are presenting virtually, you want to make sure to hardwire into your modem so that you have the most bandwidth as possible when you're giving your presentation. Because often, a couple of you mentioned technological problems, and that often will happen if someone doesn't have a strong connection. So you just want to make sure that your connection is as strong as possible, which will typically involve hardwiring into your modem. The other thing is you want to think about your lighting. And if you want to avoid sitting right in front of a window where a lot of light's coming in, because that'll put you in shadow. So you may need to have a lamp, you want to close those shades or have a light in front of you. I just am showing a picture here of my setup in my office of little packs of lights that I got that are from Amazon that were quite inexpensive. They're dimmable, and that lighting is hard. It's changing all the time. Like right now, it's gray and cloudy and dim outside, so my lighting looks really different than it did a couple of weeks ago when it was bright and sunny outside. So I found that lights that you can dim are really a nice tool for you to have. The other thing is very unintuitive, and that is if you're giving a conference presentation virtually, remember to occasionally look into the camera, because that's how you make a connection with your audience. Because like right now, I could look down at the slide of my screen and I see Jamie and I see Anne, and I feel like I'm talking right to them right now. But to them, I'm looking off camera. So you really don't feel like I'm connecting with you until I'm looking right in the camera. Like I said, it's very unintuitive. But there's a couple things you can do to make it easier. So for instance, one thing I did is I have my laptop I have the camera right below eye level. So even if I'm glancing down at my screen, I'm not, my eyes aren't so far away from the camera that I look like I'm looking off here. So the other thing is just to remember occasionally to glance up and look right into the camera. Oh, that was my point about raising up my laptop. So today we've learned that there are 15 best practices for designing and delivering an engaging conference presentation. So as you can see, I have just ended with my key point message, my key message. All right, and we learned it through brain rules, adult learning principles, and engaging visuals. All right, so I'm going to stop my share. And I want to show you that, thank you for the love there and the claps. There's one thing that I've sent you that I think will make it easier for you when you're actually designing your presentation, and it's called the presentation template. And it's just to help you kind of follow along and remember. And if you do these things, I promise you, your presentations will be so strong. So you know, your title slide that you don't talk on, then you have your compelling introduction slide, which might just be 1 or 2 slides. You don't want to stay on that impact slide for too long. You introduce yourself, and that really should say open with impact. I realize I have updated something since I made this. So, but this should be your open with impact slide. Then you introduce yourself, remember a photo, then your key message with your message on it. And then your body of the talk has your content slides where you have 1 concept per slide, large photos, animation, clear graphs, tell stories. Then your ending slide is repeat the key message slide. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just take 5 minutes and send you into breakout rooms. And I have 2 things I'd like you to do, and write these down, because often people get into a breakout room and they forget what they were supposed to do. They kind of space out. So number 1, introduce yourself. And number 2, say 1 thing you learned today that you plan to use in your next presentation. So introduce yourself, 1 thing you learned that you plan to use in your next presentation. So let me bring this up. And I'm just going to put about 3 of you into a room. So let me just do about 7 rooms here. All right, there are about 3 in each room, 2 in one. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, and if you still have your room will close automatically and bring you back. You'll get 1 minute of warning, and then it's going to bring you automatically back. So I will see you, going to open the rooms, and so let yourself in, and then I'll bring you back in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right. So this is the time that I would love to hear any questions that you might have. We have a few more minutes left. And so I just checked, and the challenges list has disappeared. And I think it's because it's the WSU system and not mine. But anyway, with that said, I think we covered most everything that was on that list. But if there's anything that you would like me to cover a little bit more, please take a second and ask if there's any questions that you might have. Liz.
Hey, Cathy, thanks so much for today. I'm curious, do you have kind of a average time per slide? Like, I've been told I have 7 minutes to talk about the thing that I've been asked to talk about. And so that's been part of my challenge, is like, well, how much do I cram in to that 7 minutes?
That's a really good question. And what I found is that it really, you'd be surprised how many slides you could actually show. You could probably easily show 30 slides. So it's not really about how much time. You just want to keep it moving along. And I think you'll find if you go to 1 concept per slide, you'll have a lot more slides than you will believe you would have had, you know. And I wanted just to say, because sometimes people will say you have 7 minutes and then they'll give you a limit on slides. But I just want to say, very strongly that it's never about the number of slides. It's always about, are you sticking to time? And
Yeah.
one of you mentioned that on the challenges list, that either you go over time or someone ahead of you goes over time, and suddenly you have less time. So it's always about the time. So if someone says you have 5 minutes and 5 slides, you can say, I promise I'll stick to 5 minutes, and then you do. And then you can have as many slides as you need to in within that 5 minute block that you need. And
Yeah.
so that's what I would
There's a
recommend.
concept that like there's too many slides, right? And so, but I don't feel like that's what you talked about here, is that it's really about how you're moving through them.
It's how you're moving through them. Yeah. And you want to practice so that you then make sure that you end on. So if you put a lot of slides together and realize, oh, I am really rushing through to get that through that 7 minutes, then definitely take some out. And I think you'll find that when you come up with that key point or that key message at the beginning, make sure every slide falls exactly under that key message. And anything that doesn't support that key message, get rid of it. And I think you'll find that that's a real easy way to get rid of extraneous content. Yeah, thank you, Liz. Jamie.
Yeah, I noticed kind of as you were going through this, because we had a lot of like different things to cover, doing that roadmap. So you started with the modules, and I guess that would probably be kind of after your key message. Is that where is a good place to put like we're gonna go through, 4 main points today. Not that you have to have it that rigid. Just
Yeah,
curious where you'd fit that in, I guess, probably after the key message.
right after the key message, you can say, you can either kind of show what your structure is going to be. So today I'm going to cover 3 things, or and then 1, 2, 3, or let me start with some context about this issue. Yeah, that can all happen after your key message.
Cool.
Yeah,
And thank you for the presentation.
you're welcome.